Hello and welcome to another edition of Lab Rats. My name is Andy Walker.
I'm Sean Carruthers.
And today on the show, I think we're getting into kind of practical mode here and solving some problems that I actually personally have had lately, and I wanted to share them with you because it's a set of solutions that I've been looking for a while, and that is...
getting a psychiatrist?
Yes, Sean. So I can deal with you. No. So I moved to a house recently. I bought a large 3,000 square foot house with my wife, and we're going to renovate, but ultimately, before we can run cables all over the place and put gigabit Ethernet ports in every room, we had to figure out a way to get connectivity from the front of the house to the back of the house. And the old 802.11g router that we had sitting there that was a couple of years old really wasn't cutting it.
No.
So the problem was that we had the router in the front of the house, and by the time we went downstairs into the back of the kitchen, there was nothing, there was no signal at all. So I wanted to find ways to do it simply and easily, and there is actually several strategies you can use, especially if, for example, you may not have a big house, but you do have multiple floors and you want to get into the basement from upstairs or something along those lines. So today we're going to cover off how to deal with Wi-Fi dead spots. Are
your solutions wife-friendly? This is important.
Yeah, this is very important. They actually are wife-friendly, because my wife is actually, you would think that a guy like me and a guy like you would be marrying women that were super high-tech gals, and it turns out, I don't know about you, but I chose a low-tech gal who doesn't like technology.
Opposites attract, as they say.
Perhaps that's true. Anyway, so we're going to make sure that you, and if you're a gal and you have a low-tech husband, these tips will work for you too. So it's if you have a low-tech spouse and a high-tech house, we're going to show you how to beat Wi-Fi dead spots today on Lab Rats. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how to do that. Well, while my co-host here is folding paper airplanes, because I don't think he's going to contribute a whole lot.
Yeah, those are Matt's notes, actually. He needed them back.
All right.
I'm too lazy to walk over.
I just figured you were making time while I explained to the good folks in Lab Rats land about this topic.
No, we can both do that. Go ahead. We can get started.
All right. So let's get started. So we're going to assume that we're going to make some assumptions here. Okay. So it's a little bit more of an advanced episode. We're going to assume that you have a wireless router built into, you have a high-speed internet connections coming into your house, that you have a router already built into that to share it wirelessly or wired with multiple computers in your household.
Okay.
Okay. So the level of conversation is a little higher. Now, if you aren't familiar with routers and that sort of thing, we do have an episode from earlier this year that talks about how to install a router. So we'll leave you guys to go and check that out before you come back to the more advanced stuff. For those of you who know what a router is, have one installed right now, you're just going to start at a place where you're going to go to your router and you're going to go, how old is this router, right? And what technology is it? Is it 802.11b, which is super old, or 802.11g, which is kind of the common router that you would have, in your house over if you bought it in the last couple of years or so, right? So that's a 54 megabit router that you might have. Now, that is probably not going to do what you want it to do in terms if you have a big space and you want it to reach multiple floors or the way to the back of a larger house. Right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't have the range.
Yeah, G was good. It improved on the old 802.11b spec in terms of speed, but and some of them had better distance, but it wasn't great leaps.
Right. So ultimately, it's not going to cut it when it comes to, because what happens is, the range gets halved every time you have to go through a wall or anything metal. So while the package may say, have a range of 30 feet, or I can't remember what the spec is on G, but it was, it was under 100 feet. I think it was 30 meters. That's
30 meters,
so
about 100
feet. But every time you go through a wall, actually that connectivity gets halved.
Yeah, that's definitely under ideal conditions, which would be in an open field, which nobody lives in.
Right, when the wind's not blowing.
Yeah, and so this definitely wouldn't get you from one end to the other of the Walker Mansion.
The Walker Mansion, there you go. So ultimately, you want to actually think about replacing your router. Now, the first option would be to go in with a new router using the 802.11n specification. N for new, I don't know, who knows?
Nice.
N for nice.
Nifty.
Nifty, right? That technology came out in the summer of 2009. Most routers, if you go to the store today, you can pick one up for, under $200, probably north of $100. They haven't cracked the $99 mark. But ultimately, replace your router.
Yeah.
That's going to, N will give you massive distance with improved speed inside of that distance. So it goes to more than, I think when we first introduced it, increased it by about 5 to 6 times the range. And then as you got to the outskirts of that technology, the throughput on that distance was actually improved right up to the edge of it. So that's going to be your first choice. Spend $100, replace that, see if that works. Now, I tried this.
Doesn't take.
I actually bought a new router. I installed it, and instantaneously I went from 5 bars right up nearby it to, and I went back to the kitchen where I had 0 bars before. I went to 3 bars now. Now, 3 bars out of 5 is not bad, but really, you know, if you want to do all the things you want to do on the internet and get performance and just work away, which I like to do, you know, it wasn't satisfactory.
No.
I still wanted really good, robust signal. Now, I know that you did that, and throughout your house, you have pretty good throughput with your end router, correct?
Yeah, I mean, my house is all relatively contained, so it wasn't as big a deal for us. But definitely from the front of the house to the back, so the front has the router, the back has the Apple TV, for example, which is one of our big wireless devices on that end of the house. And it could be pretty slow, and that's the problem. The fainter your signal gets, the lower the speed will get. So if you had 54 on G, if you get it far enough away, it'll just start dropping down until you're getting like at 1 megabyte or even worse, which is bad. So you want it to get as strong as possible.
Right. And with N, of course, automatically you're going to 100 plus, 100 to 300 megabits per second potentially under lab conditions. But, you know, it's drastically improved over that optimal G experience, right? So that would be your first choice. Okay, so the router, you're going to swap that out first.
Yes.
Second of all, if that doesn't serve your needs, you can use a technology called powerline. We talked a bit about this in an earlier episode. You have a couple of devices here.
Yeah.
So what this does is these devices go into the power connector in your house, and on the bottom, so there's the power connector in the house. These are the North American versions. If you're in Europe, you may see, you know, obviously a different plug configuration. If you flip that over and show, it actually has an Ethernet connection there. So this goes from this device into the back of your router on one end.
Right, so what we'll do is we'll plug this into the wall, plug this in over here, and then plug this other side over to here.
Right.
Okay.
Now what's cool about this is now you're pumping you're sharing your internet connection over this cable into the device, and you're pumping it into your power system in the house. So so you can go to any other outlet now in the house, plug a second one of these guys, and pull it out of the power line, back into Ethernet, so and plug that end into whatever device, perhaps into my computer, for example.
Yeah, which you already plugged in, I think. Or are you? No. Oh, you're disconnected. So yeah, so you can plug this into the outlet over here.
Right.
Now, they won't work through power bars, we've found.
No, don't work through power bars. And some of the older houses have some problems in terms of the fuses and that sort of thing.
Right.
It can be, you know, if you have a newer house, a new electrical, there is some connectivity that works. And the new generation of these guys provides good throughput and has overcome some of those original issues.
Right. So this is a really quick and easy way to get from the basement up to the 3rd floor of a house,
right,
potentially.
Not with the super fast speed that perhaps you want. I know that these guys, you won't get 100 megabits per second, I don't think, anymore. But you get reasonable speeds, you know, out of the thing. So that would be option number 2. And I really did that for a little while. My Apple TV is downstairs in my back living room. My connection is at the front in the house, in the upstairs bedroom. Again, Apple TV worked fine off of that.
Yeah, and we actually did this in our house as well for one of our computers that wasn't wireless built in. So it was an old tower, and we had these things. These are actually the devices that we had, one up front in the room with the router and the other one in the room with the computer, and the way it was, the way it goes. It was just like it was connected to the network.
Yeah, it's good.
Because it was.
Right? It's relatively easy to use, and it's almost invisible to you.
Yeah, think of your home wiring here as like the world's longest extension cable for your Ethernet cable.
Those guys. Good. All right. So the next step would be, of course, now that worked for me for a while, but I wasn't pushing it back out. The Wi-Fi signal from my laptop in the back of the house. You know, I didn't want to run a wire from this or share this in any way. So my next step was to get a router, a second router, okay? So now I bought a second router like this. Now let's pretend that this is not our main router now anymore, but this is the second router that I bought. And let's get rid of this as well.
There we go. We have a second router here.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So what I did here was I took this router and I plugged it into instead of having my Apple TV go from the power line into my Apple TV, the power line now went into the second router.
Well, let's bring this back up then.
Let's bring it up.
So we plug this into the second router so we've got the internet, and then we've got the other sections are here. So instead of plugging it into that, we plug it into the internet section as if this was the internet, which it is.
There you go. So now what that does is this talks to the main router upstairs.
Right. And so we'd have this other one plugged in exactly the same way. And in this one, instead of plugging into internet, we plug it into one of these other external ports.
Okay. So now, we have our master router, right? Brings in the internet and is sharing. It pushes it through the power line down to the outlet downstairs in the living room and pushes it to this router.
Yeah. So these routers are not next to each other in this
they're
configuration.
They're 2 floors apart.
So.
Okay. Now what I have to do is I have to configure the second router to behave almost like a repeater. And I want it to talk to the main router without any nonsense. So here's what I did. So I go into my second router downstairs that I'm going to be using as a repeater. I'm going to go into the interface here, and I'm going to change so normally you would connect this router to your internet connection. What we're doing here is instead of doing that, we're connecting it to the first router, but having the first router behave like your internet service provider.
Right.
So normally you would have a DHCP or PPPoE configuration here. In my case, I'm going to set it up as a static IP. So what I want to do is I want to tell the second router I'm going to get an IP address that does not change on the first router. So I'm going to go back here. So I'm going to get into the router. Now, if you probably recall, you're going to type 192.168.1.1 for a Linksys router to get into it with a web browser. A second to make that happen. There's my interface. My username is blank. My password is admin. If you have a D-Link router or a Netgear, of course, the way to get into this is going to be different. Look in your manual for that. I click OK. I'm on the main screen here under Setup. And I'm going to configure my internet service provider, which is not my internet service, but the primary router upstairs through the power line. And I'm going to say, let's configure this as a static IP device. So what I want is to say to the upstairs router, I want the IP address 192.168. And this one is going to be 1.1, which is the default. The second router, I'm just going to name it something else on the network. I give it 111.1. Okay, it could be 102. It could be all the way up to 254. So 192.168, and you can choose from 100 all the way up to 254.1. Just basically we're differentiating it here. Or the other way I can do it is I can say .1. And then the last number I can do is a differentiator. But ultimately, you want to represent it on the network as a separate IP address. It doesn't conflict with the first one.
Right.
Okay? So I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to go 192.168.1.111. And that's the IP address that's always going to be for the second router. Now I'm going to go down to the bottom here for the internal. So when a computer connects to the second router, it wants to get an IP address, again, that looks different than the one upstairs. So I'm going to call it, let's do it the other way around this time. Let's go 192.168.150.1. Okay. So we're representing, this one is a subset of this one, and this one we're changing the IP address completely so that when a computer connects to it, it doesn't look like the same IP address that we're connecting to upstairs if we happen to get a wireless signal.
Okay.
That makes sense so far? Okay, good. So
I think so.
You think so? Okay.
All these numbers, networking is hard.
It can be hard. All you're doing, when it comes to a router, all you're doing is a router will have 2 IP addresses. One that it represents to the internet, and one that it represents to the things that are connected to it.
So an internal address and an external address.
Right. So we're saying we're saying in this particular case that your internet provider, the IP address you're representing the internet provider, which is actually your upstairs router, is going to be a subset of what that's expecting. So upstairs is 192.168.1.1, and this is going to be 196.168.1. Choose a number between 101 and 254.
Let's say 200. Let's make it easy.
Right. So .1.200. And that's going to be always its IP address. It's going to be a child of this network. That's the external IP address. The internal IP address that it represents to all the other computers is going to be a different number again, 192.168.111.1. And all you're doing is you're differentiating the IP addresses on the network. Okay.
So this is network address translation, essentially.
Sort of, kind of, yeah, exactly. That's more so a way to do it. Okay, so that's one thing you want to do. Now, the only other thing you want to do next is going to be go into your wireless settings here. And you're going to change the SSID, meaning the name of the wireless network, because if upstairs in my house, it's called bunny slippers. Downstairs, I don't want it to be called bunny slippers, or I could call it that. I'm going to call it bunny slippers too.
This is what happens when you let your 7-year-old name your networks.
Okay, so I'm going to go to my wireless network. We're going to call it bunny slippers 2, so that I know which network I'm on based on, when I go in the morning and I fire everything up and I watch and look for a network to connect to, I choose which one has the best bars, and obviously I want to differentiate between the two.
The sad thing is these names are actually better than the ones he used before.
Which is what?
You don't want to know.
Okay. And that's all there is really to it. Now you want to do a reboot of the router. You want to make sure the router is the downstairs router is talking to the upstairs router, and you want to make sure you can connect to the downstairs router now on a separate SSID, a separate network name. And then you're basically going to get a nice solid signal downstairs pulled through the power line from the upstairs router, and it's going to be robust and give you really good connectivity.
All right.
All right. So you may want to stop and go through this a little bit by little bit, because it is a bit complicated.
Show notes.
But yeah, check out the show notes.
I'm going to need the show notes, I think.
And finally, the other alternative is, Powerline is not going to give you a super fast connectivity across. It's going to be limited. So the spouse unfriendly thing is to actually take a gigabit cable, meaning Cat6, so it's rated as 1,000 megahertz, 1 gigabit per second rated cable, and run it from the upstairs under the carpet all the way downstairs.
Yeah, no, the wife's not going to like that.
To the source where you're going to do this. Now we have a central VAC system that's aging, and ultimately I'm going to run gigabit Ethernet through that as well. I have that luxury. Not everybody does that, but that would be the ideal situation. Would be a wired solution from one router to another.
All right.
All right. So there you go. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we've got a clip of one of the shows on Butterscotch as well as picture time. That's after this. Now, if you don't want to go through all this rigmarole, and I know it's pretty onerous in terms of multiple routers and that sort of thing, we do have a solution for you, and Sean's got it right here. What's that called?
This is called the Wi-Fi from H-Field. And this is an antenna, an extended range antenna, so that you can zero in on signals.
All right, pull it in. Okay. So Andrew Moore-Crispin, who does Gadget TV, recently did this on one of his shows. So we're going to show you a clip of that right now, and when we come back, final thoughts after this.
Welcome on deck. I'm Matt Harris.
Hi, I'm Jay Goldman.
Welcome to the A-List. Hi, welcome to Miss Download.
And what it is, it's a reasonably small Wi-Fi adapter that allows you to effectively triple the range of your notebook when you're trying to find a Wi-Fi signal. It's really good for college students who maybe are in the library and are finding the school Wi-Fi signal is a little weak. You can also use it in the backyard, for example. When your Wi-Fi connection point is in the house, you can actually, like I say, triple the range. So it goes from about, if you look at 802.11g, which is a Wi-Fi standard, you can effectively triple the range from about 300 feet to almost 1,000 feet. And both of those numbers are in kind of best case scenario conditions.
Well, this has been pretty informational heavy, and so we're going to do a pretty good job of posting some decent show notes for you to step by step through this process. Of course, we always want to hear from you, and if you want to send an email into us with ideas for shows, questions, comments, or your photos, you can email us at
Extend your network using tin cans and string at labrats.tv.
Yeah, or if you want to do that more simply,
feedback at labrats.tv.
There you go. All right, well, thanks for tuning in this week. Thanks for pushing play. We love it when you guys come and see us. We'd be foolish to be here if you weren't out there. My name's Andy Walker.
I'm Sean Carruthers.
And we'll see you next time.
Are you ready?
This one's rolling already? Okay.
Your camtation running?
It is, yeah.
Thank you.
Is your internet running?
Is your refrigerator?
Do you have Prince Albert in a can?